Hey ladies and gentlemen, this is Miss Humbert here, and today we're going to be doing Unit 4 Notes 3. So we're going to look at factoring trinomials, which is going to be kind of a combination of everything we've done in the first part of this unit. And actually it's also one of the most important things that we're going to do in algebra altogether. So first of all, in order to be able to do this, you need to make sure you're really comfortable with factoring by grouping. So I'm just going to go ahead and go over that really quickly. So you're going to create your two groups. So you're going to decide, okay, out of the first group between 5 and 15, what can I take out? You can take out a 5 and you can take out a y. So I'm dividing each of these terms by 5y. So when I do that, I'm left with y minus 3. Between 4 and 12, I can take out a 4. And dividing each of those by 4, I'm left with y minus 3. Now remember, in order for factoring by grouping to work, your leftovers need to be matching. So if they're not matching, then you did something wrong. So then we're going to have y minus 3. And then in our other parenthesis, it's what we pulled out as our greatest common factor, which is 5y plus 4. So this right here is our final answer for number 1. So now let's take a look at number 2, making our two groups. Between 18 and 30, you can take out a 2 and an x. Yeah, because you take out a 6. I lied. You can take out a 6 and an x. So then we're going to divide each of those by 6x. So let's say you did do that. Let's say you didn't take out the right GCF. Then your leftovers didn't match. That's one of those cases where you did something wrong. So then 18 divided by 6 is 3. X squared divided by x is just x. 30 divided by 6 is going to be 5. And then x divided by x will cancel out. Well, out of this second group, I can't take anything out. But I notice there's a negative sign in front of that 3. So that means I can take out a negative 1. So I'm only taking out a 1, and I want to take out a negative 1 because my first term is negative. So then I end up with a positive 3x minus 5. So here my leftovers are matching, so I can factor those out. And then once I get rid of my leftovers, 6x minus 1 is left on the outside of that. So then this right here is my final answer for number 2. So let's take a look at our steps for factoring when a is not equal to 1. So first thing you need to do is check for a greatest common factor. You really want to make sure you do that first because it makes things a lot easier if you make sure that you take out the GCF, so then you deal with smaller numbers. Then you're going to multiply a times c. So you're going to take the first and multiply it times the last. Okay, so a times c. All right, then you're going to set up the x. So the x is going to look like this. You're going to have a times c up top, and then your b term is going to go to the bottom. Then it's going to ask you to solve for the solve the x. So what you're going to do is try and figure out which factor goes where. And that'll make more sense when we actually go into solving the x. Then you're going to plug new factors into place of the b term. So you're going to split the b term up based off of the two factors that you are given here. And then you have 4 terms, so you can go ahead and factor by grouping. So that doesn't really make a lot of sense until you have the chance to actually go through and look at an actual problem. So let's start by setting up the x. There's no greatest common factor because 13 is a prime number. So I'm going to take 5 times 6. So 5 times 6 is 30, okay? Then we're multiplying to 30, and then down here, we're going to be adding to 13. So the top is always your product, so that's what you're going to be multiplying to. The bottom is your sum, so that's what you need to add to. So we need to find a number that multiplies to 30 and adds to 13. So what I like to do is write out the things that multiply to 30. So I have 1 and 30. 2 and 15, 3 and 10. So since they're both positive, I want to look for positive. So they're both going to be positive. So then 3 and 10 is going to add to 13. So that's going to be my factors, 3 and 10. So now I'm going to use that to split up my middle term. So instead of writing 13x, I'm going to write 10x, or you could write 3x. It doesn't matter which order you put these in. Plus 3x plus 6. So if you were to add 10x plus 3x, you would get this 13x here. Okay, but we're not going to do that. We actually want to split it up so we can factor by grouping. So that's what we're going to do. I'm going to make my two groups. So between 5x squared and 10x, I can take out a 5 and an x. So I'm dividing each of these terms by 5x, and then I'm left with x plus 2. Between 3x and 6, I can take out a 3, and then I'm left with x plus 2. So now I see that my leftovers are matching, so I can go ahead and write them as a factor. And then outside of each of my factors, I have 5x plus 3, so that's what's going to be my other factor. So this is our goal. We want to get our answer written as two binomials being multiplied. So basically what factoring does is it undoes the box method. So that's our goal here, and we have a ton of examples. We have 20 different examples. So if this is confusing now, we're going to go through a lot of examples of it. So taking a look at number 4, we're going to set up the x. So we're going to take 7 times 4, which is 28. And then we're adding to 29. So now let's just set up our chart. Maybe you can look at that and immediately know what factors go into that. So going into 28, we have 1 and 29 and 4 and 7. A lot of students forget about this 1 and 29 option. Well, 1 and 28, I'm sorry. Okay, this 1 times 28 is going to be 28. Well, 1 plus 28 is 29. Remember, product up here, sum down here. So we're going to have 1 and 28 as our two factors. So we're going to use that to split up this 29x. So I'm going to have 7x, and I'm putting an x with each of these guys in here. So I'm going to have plus 1x plus 28x plus 4. So now that I have the 4 terms, I'm not going to add the like terms together. I'm actually ready to solve by grouping. So I'm going to go ahead and make my two groups. Between 7x squared and 1x, I can only take out an x. So I'm going to divide everything by x. Between 28 and 4, I can take out a 4. So I'm going to divide everything by 4, and I'm left with 7x plus 1. Remember, 4 over divided by 4 is 1, not 0. So my leftovers are matching here, so I can go ahead and factor those out. Then I have x plus 4 here. And this right here is my final answer for number 4. So now let's take a look at number 5. So for number 5, I'm going to go ahead and set up my x. So even though there's no number here, that's the same as a 1. So I'm multiplying 1 times 16. And that's going to give me a positive 16. But here, I'm multiplying to a negative 10. Whenever you have a positive product and a negative sum, both of your signs need to be negative. Because if you think about it, in order to multiply to a positive number, your signs need to be the same. And if they need to add to a negative number, both the signs need to be negative. So let's write out what multiplies to 16. We have 1 and 16, which is going to be a negative 1, negative 16, negative 2, negative 8, or negative 4, negative 4. So negative 2, negative 8 is what's going to multiply to a positive 16 and add to a negative 10. So let's go ahead and let's split it up. So we get x squared minus 2x minus 8x minus 10. Okay, so we've split up that middle term. And now we're ready to factor by grouping. So I'm going to go ahead and make my two groups. Between x squared and 2x, I can take out an x, and then we're left with x minus 2. So here I have a negative sign, okay? Oops, sorry, there should be a positive 16 at the end. That was my fault. You always take the end and you bring it down. Okay, so the only terms you're changing are these middle two. So that one was my fault. So then we have a negative. So we're going to take out a negative greatest common factor. Between 8 and 16, I can take out a negative 8. So then I'm left with x minus 2. So here, my leftovers are matching, so I can go ahead and factor out the x minus 2, and then I have x minus 8 left over on the outside. So again, key thing to remember, guys, is you're keeping these two terms the same and only changing the middle terms, which is a mistake I conveniently just made, so I apologize for that. Now let's take a look at this guy. So you're multiplying to negative 18 and adding to negative 7. Well, if we have a negative product, we need to have a positive and a negative number. So let's go ahead and write out the things that multiply to 18. Well, we could have negative 1 and 18. Positive 1, negative 18. Positive 2, negative 9. Negative 2, 9. And I actually look, and right away I see that positive 2 and negative 9 is going to add to negative 7. So notice that I was writing out all the different combinations of positives and negatives, and then I just stopped when it worked, because 2 times negative 9 is negative 18, 2 plus negative 9 is negative 7. So now we're going to go ahead and add this up, and we're going to split the middle term. So we're going to have 2x minus 9x, and then minus 18. So now I'm ready to factor by grouping. So I'm going to go ahead and make my two groups. Between x squared and 2x, I can take out an x. Dividing each, I'm at x plus 2. Negative 9, negative 18, I can take out a negative 9. So then that's going to change both of those signs. Remember, it took out a negative 9 because that first sign was negative. So here my leftovers are matching, so I can take out the x plus 2. And then after that is x minus 9. So that right there is your final answer for number 6. Now, let's take a look at number 7. So first of all, looking at number 7, I noticed that 2, 22, and 8 are all divisible by 2. So I'm going to go ahead and take out a greatest common factor of 2. So that's left, that gives me 2x squared plus 11x minus 8. So by taking out the greatest common factor, I'm going to actually have a smaller number to deal with, which I really appreciate, okay? So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a negative, so I'm going to do 3, oops, I forgot to divide the 8 by 2. Goodness, welcome to my struggle. I'm filming this on a Monday in case anyone's wondering. So what I'm going to do here is 3 times negative 4. So negative 12 is going to go up here, and positive 11 is going to go down here. So 2, this greatest common factor here, I call it the little sister. So what we're going to do is we're going to ignore our little sister until we leave. You bring your little sister to the mall. You have to make sure that you do you have to make sure you leave with her, but you don't necessarily need to have her while you're at the mall. So we just need to make sure we have that 2 at the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start filling in the factors as I go. If you need help understanding that, let me know and I can help you with that. So what multiplies to negative 12 and adds to 11? Well, that's going to be 12 and negative 1. Sometimes this part is the hardest part for students, so let me know if you're struggling with that. So then I have not 6x squared. So what I'm going to do when I go to factor this is I'm going to take this version. The 3x squared is going to stay the same. And then the 11x, I'm now going to split as 12x minus 1x minus 8. So now I'm ready to factor by grouping. Minus 4. Goodness gracious. Why do I keep doing that? Between 3 and 12, I can take out a 3 and an x, and then I'm left with x plus 4. So nothing is going to divide negative 1x and negative 4, but since that first term is negative, I'm going to take out a negative 1, and then I'm left with x plus 4. So then I'm going to have x plus 4 and 3x minus 1. And my last step is I need to remember that little sister from the beginning of the problem. So that 2 is going to be multiplied on the outside of that entire equation. So let's go ahead and let's take a look at number 8. So for number 8, we're going to be multiplying to 2 and adding to 3. Now these ones really confuse students. Since both are positive, both our factors are going to be positive. So this is actually going to be 2 and 1 that multiplies to 2 and adds to 3. So I get x squared plus 2x plus 1x plus 2, and then we're going to factor by grouping. So between x squared and 2x, we can take out an x, and then we're left with x plus 2. Between 1x and 2, we can take out a 1, and then we're left with x plus 2. Okay? So then my leftovers are matching here, so I'm going to factor out an x plus 2, and then I'm going to write x plus 1 after that. So let's take a look at the 2 unique cases. So we just had one, and that's on number 7. So sometimes you have to take out a greatest common factor, okay? And you need to make sure that you write that greatest common factor at the end. But sometimes they show up as prime, which means that they're not factorable. Now things are prime when the x doesn't work. So things are prime when the x doesn't work. Okay, so that we're going to kind of see some of those, and really all I'm doing now is a bunch of practice. So I do suggest you watch some of them, but once you feel like you're starting to get the hang of it, go ahead and try it, but I am going to talk through the rest of the examples on this video. So let's take a look at number 9. So we're going to set up the x. We're going to do 4 times 7. That's going to be 28. And we're adding to a negative 1. So I need to find something that multiplies to a positive 28 and adds to a negative 1. So, okay, they both need to be negative. So those are my 4 options if they both need to be negative. And I know they're both negative because the product's positive and the sum is negative. Well, none of those are going to work. So that's not factorable. We can't do that. So we're going to call this one here prime. Okay, so this is prime because it's not factorable. Now, taking a look at number 10, we can actually take out a greatest common factor of 5. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So then I'm left with 2y squared minus 7y plus 6. Okay, so now I'm going to do my x just based off of that guy right there. So we're multiplying to 12 and adding to negative 7. Well, since my product is positive, then I know both the signs need to be negative. So things that add to 12, 1 and 12, 2 and 6, 3 and 4. Well, negative 3 plus negative 4 add to negative 7 and multiply to a positive 12. So now I'm going to keep the 2y squared in the equation, and then I'm going to have negative 3y minus 4y plus 6. So now I'm going to factor that by grouping. So out of this first group, I could take out a y, and then I'm left with 2y minus 3. Notice I have a minus sign here, so I need to take out a negative greatest common factor. Between 4y and 6, I can take out a 2, and then I'm left with 2y minus 3 when I take out that negative 2. So my leftovers are matching here, so that's going to be one of my parentheses. And then y minus 2 here, that's going to be my other parenthesis. And I can't forget at the beginning that I took out a greatest common factor, so I need to make sure I write that 5 down at the bottom. So this right here is my final answer, and you always want to make sure you write that GCF at the end. Taking a look at number 11, 3x squared, 24x, and 45 are all divisible by 3. So then I end up getting x squared plus 8x plus 15. So now I'm going to set up my x just using that part right there. So I'm multiplying to 15 and adding to 8. So everything is going to be positive. So to multiply to 15, I have 1 and 5, or 1 and 15, and 3 and 5. Well, 3 and 5 add to 8. So that's what I'm going to fill my x out with. So then I'm going to have 3x squared, and instead of writing 8x, I'm going to split that up to be 3x plus 5x plus 15. Again, using this version, keeping the first and the last term the same. I'm sorry, x squared then, if I'm using that version. Come on, Miss Humbert. So then we're going to factor by grouping. So between x squared plus 3x, you're going to get an x, and then you're left with x plus 3. Between 5x and 15, you could take out a 5, and then you're left with x plus 3. So my leftovers are matching, so I'm going to write those in one of the parentheses. And then I'm going to write the other parenthesis, which is x plus 5. So my greatest common factor is 3, so I need to make sure I write that on the outside. So that's my final answer for number 11. So taking a look at number 12, I'm multiplying to 2 and adding to 2. So things that multiply to 2 are, well, 2 and 1. Well, that adds to 3, so that's not going to work. So that means this guy right here is prime. Okay, now let's take a look at number 13. So for number 13, we're going to multiply. So 10 times 28 is 280. And then here we get a negative 43. So let's say you have a huge number like this and you have no idea if things are going to add. So what I do is I just start working my way down. Well, I know I have 1 and 280. So then I can take 280 divided by 2, and I get 2 and 140. Then I can take 280 divided by 3. Oh, that's the decimal, so that doesn't work. 280 divided by 4 is 70. Okay, 280 divided by 5 is 56. Okay, and you can keep going on like this. So that was all I was doing to get those factors, because sometimes it's hard when it's big numbers. I will tell you, just to save you some time, that there is nothing that works here. So this one is not factorable, which means we have a prime candidate here. So taking a look at number 14. So let's go ahead and set up our x for number 14. So we're going to multiply to -4 and add to -5. Well, since it's a positive product, we need a positive, or negative product, we need a positive and a negative. So 4, I have 1 and -4, -1 and 4, 2 and -2. Well, none of those are going to add to 5. So this one also is not factorable, which means that it is prime. Okay, so excuse me, so if it doesn't work, it is prime. So let's take a look at number 15. So we're multiplying to 9 and adding to 3. Well, things that multiply to 9, 1 and 9, 3 and 3. Are any of those going to add to 3? No. So this one is also not factorable, which means it is prime. So now let's take a look at number 16. So here we're multiplying to -6 and adding to -5. Now this is one that a lot of students like to say that it's not factorable, but it actually is factorable, and it's also time to go to lunch apparently. So we're going to have 6 and -1. So notice that that multiplies to -6 and adds to 5. So that's good. So now we're ready to factor by grouping. I'm going to keep the first term the same, but then I'm going to split up the second term to be 6x minus 1x minus 6, like so. So now I'm ready to factor by grouping. So I'm going to make my two groups. Between x squared and 6x, I can take out an x, and then I'm left with x plus 6. Between -1 and -6, I can take out a -1, and then I'm left with x plus 6. So here I have x plus 6. And then once I take my leftovers out, I have x minus 1. So that right there is my final answer. So here's a trick for you. Okay, if you need to check your answers, you can also do that using the box method. Okay, so this will help you to check your answer. When you do the box method on this, you should get that original answer. So that's a way of checking your answers if you would like to. So let's take a look at 17. So for 17, we're multiplying to -36 and adding to 5. So what are some things that multiply to 36? Okay, so get rid of that. So we're going to have, well, 1 and 36, positive and negative, 2 and 18, 3 and 13, 4 and 9, and 6 and 6. So we need to take positive and negative versions of those answers because we're going to have a positive and a negative factor. Well, 9 and 4 will give me 5. I want my 9 to be positive and my 4 to be negative because I want my answer to yield a positive 5. So let's go ahead and let's plug that into groups. So we're going to have 6x squared, and then I'm going to split up this middle term. So between 5x, I'm going to do minus 9x, or plus 9x minus 4x in place of that 5, and then everything else is going to stay the same. So now I'm going to factor by grouping. So here I'm going to make my two groups. Between 6 and 9, I can take out a 3. Between x squared and x, I can take out an x. So 6 divided by 3 is 2, and then x. And then 9 divided by 3x is just going to be 3. Between -4 and -2, I'm actually going to take out a -2 because this first sign is negative. So -4 divided by -2 is 2x. -6 divided by -2, that's what's going to give me a positive 3. So then here I have 2x plus 3. And then in my next one, 3x minus 2. So that's my final answer for number 17. Now, when I look at 18, I notice that I can take out a greatest common factor of 2. So everything in here is divisible by 2. So I'll have 3x squared minus 7x minus 6. Okay, so now I'm ready to set up my x. So I'm going to do 3 times a -6, which is a -18. And then my answer is -7x. Now, I'm really resourceful. So if I look back, we've already done this x before. Okay, we already did -18 and -7 on number 6. So when we did that, we got 9 and 2. Sometimes that'll happen. There'll be a different problem, but the x is the same. So make sure you're paying attention to that. So I'm just going to use this version right here. I'm going to ignore my 2 for right now. So I'm going to have 3x squared. Now, instead of writing 7x, I'm going to write minus 9x plus 2x minus 6. And now I'm ready to factor by grouping. So here I'm going to make my two groups. Between 3x squared and 9x, I can take out a 3 and an x. 3x squared divided by 3x is just x. Negative 9x divided by 3x is just minus 3. Out of this second group, I can divide everything by 2, and again, I get x minus 3. So I can go ahead and take my factors out. So I have x minus 3 that I just pulled out, and then I have 3x plus 2 that's going to come out after that. Let's take a look at number 19. So we're going to set this up. So this is the same as a 1. So 1 times 5 is 5. So you're multiplying to 5 and adding to 6. So that's going to be 5 and 1. So now I'm ready to set it up for grouping. So instead of writing 6x, I'm going to write 5x plus 1x plus 5. And now I'm ready to factor by grouping. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and make my groups. Between x squared and 5x, I can take out an x, and then I'm left with x plus 5. Between x and 5, I can only take out a 1, and then I'm left with x plus 5. So then my first group is going to be x plus 5. My second group is going to be x plus 1. And that's my final answer for number 19. Again, last but not least, almost done here. Taking a look at number 20, we're multiplying to negative 2, and since there's no number there, that means we're multiplying to 1. That doesn't mean we're multiplying to 0, we're multiplying to 1. So since it's a negative 2, we're going to have a positive and a negative factor. So what I'm going to end up using is 2 and negative 1. That multiplies to a negative 2 and adds to 1. So then I'm going to have x squared plus 2x minus x minus 2. So now I can go ahead and factor by grouping. So I'm going to make my two groups. Between x squared and 2x, I can take out an x. Here I can take out a negative 1. And then we have x plus 2. So overlapping, we have x plus 2, and then coming after that is x minus 1. So that concludes your very long note video for today. If you have any questions, please make sure you let me know. Thanks for listening.